Yes, I'm grateful for the opportunity to give this paper on this occasion, because it's not only about 75 years of IGNTP, but also 25 years of collaboration between IGNTP and INTF. So I feel honored to be able here to look back to an earlier achievement of the IGNTP, which is the edition of the Gospel of Luke. The title of my paper may not look like it, but now we are getting closer to the festive part of the colloquium, the banquet, in honor of the 75th anniversary of the International Greek New Testament Project. It makes good sense to commemorate the IGNTP Luke on this occasion, because the planning of the edition has actually motivated the launch of the international project in 1948. The first part of the IGNTP edition of the Gospel according to St. Luke appeared in 1984 and contained chapters 1 to 12, the second in 1987, containing chapters 13 to 24. After a truly long time of preparation under 3 succeeding executive editors, G.G. Willis, 1962 to 1970, Neville Birdsall, 1970 to 1977, and Keith Elliott from 1978. First steps towards a complete apparatus to Luke had been taken in the 40s already by S.C.E. Legg, after he had published the editions of Mark in 1935 and Matthew in 1940 on behalf of the British Committee. Legg delivered his Luke apparatus to the committee in 1948, but it was not recommended for publication. Neville Birdsall reports that after this failure, the committee decided that the work had to be shared by many. George Kilpatrick was authorized to suggest Anglo-American cooperation to Ernest Colwell in 1948. Colwell voted enthusiastically for such a cooperation. Kilpatrick worked out a plan for editing Luke with the American Committee. Quoting Colwell, Birdsall continues that in the same year, Merrill Parvis visited, quote, the various members of the British Committee and reached agreement with them as to procedures so that the active work of collation could begin early in 1950 with publication in 1954, end quote. This plan obviously was far too optimistic. This is not meant as criticism. To the contrary, it speaks for the determination and perseverance of the IGNTP and, above all, of the executive editors, that in spite of the enormous complexities posed by producing a well-formed apparatus based on the work of more than 250 contributors, the 2 volumes finally appeared. The ECM Luke is far behind the IGNTP Luke in one obvious point. It has not yet appeared. Nevertheless, it is possible to compare these editions with regard to their aims and methods. Because the ECM Luke will be produced following the principles and procedures established for the Editio Critica Maior in general since 1997, when its first installment appeared. At the same time, this is a good opportunity to step back and have a look at what progress has been made since the IGNTP Luke appeared. As in the preceding ECM volumes, the text of Luke will be established on the basis of all the evidence presented in the apparatus. In marked contrast, the text of IGNTP Luke is the Textus Receptus as a collating base. Quote from the introduction, the aim of the edition is to provide an objective presentation of the textual evidence and not to construct a new text, end quote. The whole edition was meant to pave the way for a future Editio Maior with a new text. The ECM claims to be such an edition. 2 principal goals are mentioned in the first sentence of the introduction that has been repeated in subsequent volumes since the first installment, the letter of James. Quote, the Editio Critica Maior provides the full range of resources necessary for scholarly research in establishing the text and reconstructing the history of the New Testament text during its first 1,000 years, end quote. Oh, that's really tiny. I'm sorry for that. But there is a copy of this table in the handouts, if you would like to have a closer look. Now I will briefly compare the basic features and methods of the IGNTP and the prospective ECM Luke. I already mentioned the fundamentally different base text. A common feature is the full presentation of all the variants preserved in the selected Greek manuscript. The evidence is given in a negative form in the IGNTP volume, while the ECM prints a positive apparatus, if at least 15 Greek manuscripts differ from the base text. The IGNTP selection of Greek continuous text manuscripts includes all papyri and other majuscules, while the selection of minuscules is principally based on the Claremont profile method. The ECM selection also includes all papyri and is based on test passage collations for minuscules and majuscules not written on papyrus. Both methods aim at distinguishing the Byzantine mainstream tradition from older text forms. Both are also apt to find groupings within and outside the mainstream. The IGNTP selection includes 195, the ECM selection between 154 and 243 continuous text manuscripts. The minimum would be 154 manuscripts differing from the majority text at 15% or more test passages. The maximum 243 manuscripts, differing at 10% and more. It appears reasonable for the range of 10 to 15% differences to identify those witnesses which look like contributing interesting variants and leave out the rest. So the ECM will probably offer a similar amount of Greek continuous text manuscripts as the IGNTP Luke. The selection of lectionaries is far more extensive in the IGNTP volume. So far, only 10 lectionaries of various types are envisaged for the ECM. As a result of Colwell's research into the lectionary tradition, the IGNTP includes 10 manuscripts to represent the dominant lectionary text and 31 others known to diverge from the mainstream. Here, the ECM will take advantage of the fuller IGNTP apparatus and adapt the selection accordingly. Regarding Greek, Latin, and Syriac, patristic evidence, all quotations and adaptations up to the year 500 are cited in the IGNTP apparatus. An impressive section on each page of the edition is dedicated to listing all relevant passages with their bibliographical details. Here you see an example. The scope of Greek citations is wider in the ECM. As for Mark, it will comprise the quotations of all Greek church authors of the first 7 centuries, as listed in the Clavis Patrum Graecorum, and of a selection of authors from the 8th to 10th century. The printed list of source passages is presented in a supplementary volume. Latin and Syriac patristic evidence will again be integrated into the presentation of versional witnesses. The number of versions covered by the IGNTP volume is larger than envisaged for the ECM. The ECM will not include the Armenian, the Georgian, and the Old Church Slavonic versions because their origins and history are not sufficiently understood, so that comprehensive critical editions of these traditions are not available. The same applies to the Arabic and the Persian diatessaron. It is well known that Kurt Aland published a very critical review of the first volume of the IGNTP Luke. The first point of his criticism concerns the edition's text and its title, The New Testament in Greek, the Gospel according to St. Luke. Aland argues it could be misunderstood as supporting the advocates of the majority text. There's more criticism regarding the selection of witnesses in general and of the Greek manuscripts in particular, and there are lists of errors found in the apparatus. Being aware of painfully long lists of errors found in the ECM volumes, I would prefer not to count up flaws and errors on this occasion. Today, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the IGNTP, and as I would like to add, more than 25 years of partnership and collaboration between IGNTP and INTF. So let us rather look ahead. The ECM has developed along its own lines, but independently produced collations of relevant witnesses offer most welcome means to control the ECM procedures and results. Here I see an opportunity for the IGNTP Luke to finally fulfill its purpose. The first installment of the ECM containing the letter of James appeared 10 years after the second volume of IGNTP Luke. Its presentation was well received at SNTS 1997 here in Birmingham, and later that year at SBL in San Francisco. The clear structure and the generous layout of the edition was praised, although there was also some disappointment because the established text diverged so little from NA 27. One fundamental difference turns out to be more important for editors of the New Testament. Namely that the first fruit of the ECM is distinguished from all previous editions of the Greek New Testament because the printed apparatus derived from a database. One should even say that the apparatus was constructed on a database. The results of collations of Greek manuscripts, the versions and citations had still to be input manually, but thereby the evidence became digital and offered new means for the control and evaluation of the apparatus. What is at least as important, we had a basis for applying Geltmink's coherence-based genealogical method to the full set of variants in the Greek manuscript evidence. On the IGNTP side, a similar development had begun with a collation program called Manuscript. From 1997, when members of IGNTP and INTF got to know Peter Robinson's Collate software, the adoption of computer-aided collation was seen as an indispensable factor of progress in editing the New Testament with its large manuscript tradition. In 1999, the second Birmingham Colloquium on the textual criticism of the New Testament was held. There were 4 delegates from Münster, Barbara Aland, Gerd Mink, Ulrich Schmid, and myself. Keith Elliott gave the inaugural paper titled The IGNTP Luke Volumes, Prehistory and Aftermath. He frankly reported on the complexities of IGNTP work on the edition with so many scholars involved, who had to commit themselves to same guidelines so that their results could be integrated into one apparatus. By conclusion, he made a remarkable move, and here I have permission to quote from David Parker's confidential notes. His paper ended with a lively outline of possible collaboration, which set the tone for the rest of the colloquium. Discussion centered on the question of the text to be printed. Professor Elliott suggested that bullet points could be used to mark significant readings, perhaps with an accompanying textual commentary. The UBS text should be used as the base text, and the apparatus should be positive and negative as in the ECM. The move to the UBS text should take place at once. It was observed that printing the Textus Receptus is fuel to the fire of those who support its priority, end quote. There were other speakers, including Barbara Arland, David Parker, Neville Birdsall, Gerd Mink, and Peter Robinson, whose papers would deserve being remembered. All of them were relevant for the leitmotif cooperation, but after Keith Elliott's paper, any reservations about a collaboration between IGNTP and INTF were overcome. And it was only a small step from adopting the UVS text for IGNTP editions to editing the text itself. It was David Parker who took the lead on the IGNTP side to push forward the cooperation. In 2000, a preliminary agreement was signed. What followed was the Principio project initiated by David Parker to lay the foundations for ECM John. In 2005, an agreement with regard to the collaboration on the Editio Critica Maior of the Gospel of John was signed by Holger Strutwolf, David Parker, Bruce Morrill, and for the German Bible Society, Jan Bühner. 2005 is also the year when the Institute for Textual Scholarship and Electronic Editing, ITSE, was founded by David Parker and Peter Robinson. It has since taken a leading role in developing tools for digital editing, like the transcription editor and the apparatus editor, which have become indispensable for the ECM work. As a consequence of intense cooperation, Holger Strutwolf and I became members of the unified IGNTP committee in 2007. Other ECM editors at INTF followed, and today we can say that our cooperation has become part of everyday life for ECM editors on, if I counted correctly, 8 editorial teams in Europe, the UK, and the US. In 2008, the ECM was accepted as a long-term project of the North Rhine-Westphalian Academy of Sciences and the Arts. This meant reasonably secure funding for 23 years until 2030, actually, which is not so far ahead now. In the beginning, you think that that's really close to eternity, but time lapses so quickly. And now we are in a hurry to make this last deadline. The INTF application to the Academy envisaged cooperation with the IGNTP for the Gospel of John and the Pauline letters running on independent funding. And it works. Since 2011, we are having ECM sessions in combination with IGNTP committee meetings at the SBL annual meeting. Since 2016, Hugh Houghton serves as IGNTP executive editor with responsibility for the Pauline letters. Editors have been appointed for all the Pauline letters in the ECM, and at each IGNTP meeting, there are reports on considerable progress, not least also for ECM John. All this shows that the editing of Luke's Gospel in the ECM is being prepared in an era very different from the time when the IGNTP Luke was produced. The letter was conceived of as a printed edition based on materials assembled on paper, while the ECM has become fully digital with the bulky blue volumes only representing a print view. The work on IGNTP Luke began shortly after World War II and was realized in a time of fierce competition. Today, we are looking back to 25 years of fruitful cooperation. Although the INTF team will be responsible for ECM Luke, the tools used for the relevant procedures, like the transcription editor, have been developed together with the ITSE team. The apparatus editor into which the results of automatized collations are fed was produced at ITSE by Cat Smith and has been implemented into the NTVMR environment by Troy Griffiths. If we look at the digital ECM of the Gospel of Mark, we see what will be at our disposal for Luke. Each Greek manuscript cited is linked to an online edition of the document comprising images and a transcription. There will be access to the CVGM environment for each variant passage, an online textual commentary by the ECM editors, the Sahidic witnesses of each verse, the patristic citations in their contexts, the Amsterdam database of conjectures, and finally a wide range of online Bibles and commentaries. This shows that the ECM is already what I call an open digital edition. Resources may be added whenever the data becomes available. As soon as, for example, Latin or Syriac evidence has become available electronically, they can be linked in. As soon as the programming has been done, the symbols of patristic citations will be immediately linked to their occurrences in context, etc. So there are many possibilities for improvement. Moreover, we already offer unedited real-time collation. This feature will be developed into a tool that allows additional collation of transcribed Greek manuscripts. If finally you want to run the CVGM on your own textual decisions, you can download an editable Docker version of the CVGM, so far for Acts and Mark. In conclusion, we can say that cooperation instead of competition has proven to be extremely useful and productive. And all this does not mean that the IGNTP Luke now is completely useless. On the contrary, it will at least partly fulfill the purpose it was made for, namely to produce a reliable apparatus for a major critical edition. The ECM editors will, of course, make use of this valuable asset of independent collations to check the apparatus of the ECM versus IGNTP Luke. Thank you.
Time for a few questions.
Being from South Africa, I'm wondering, are there South African and the Institute for New Testament Research and the International New Testament Project?
If any of its members come from South Africa? No, not to my knowledge.
Thank you so much for this walk through history and bringing back some memories. Now I wonder what will happen in 2031. Who moves the clothes?
No, I think we will write a grant proposal for finishing off the ECM.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
More?
It's interesting to reflect back that the real change has come not in the ECM, but in the attitude of the IGNTP. The idea that its editions could be involved in producing an Ausgangstext text rather than simply amassing a collection of variants. Is there anything that you can think of that might have made the IGNTP not keen to do that at the beginning of its work? And were there too many other editions going around?
Sure, I think the idea behind printed critical editions is that that text should stand for centuries. But our mindset has become completely different. We know that there is no objective reality that we can reconstruct and then have it. It is always a matter of interpretation and more research. We saw in the previous paper that we are still detecting important witnesses, which yes, lie in museums and wait for evaluation, and this will continue for a while, I guess. And then the interpretation of all this evidence will have a new start. I'm pretty sure, and the established text will change accordingly. And that's good.
More questions still?
Since collaboration has proven better than competition, I was wondering, are there any other things you hope for in the future, other avenues of collaboration, things of that nature?
Yes, certainly. I hope that other editorial projects dealing with other texts will make use of our research and the development of our tools. At the moment, we are really ahead of everybody else in this field, in textual studies, I would say. But yes, we are so occupied with editing the New Testament first that there is not much time for communicating what we are doing. And yeah, the papers here show how specialized they are. Who else can understand what we are talking about? So we must find ways to communicate better what we are doing, independent of the special contents we are dealing with. And if we are at that point, then others may profit from our work.
Seeing as I have to speak from the chair here, is there anything that Tyndale House, Greek New Testament, could collaborate with you on? Is there any avenue, or is this being explored, or if not, would you like to go else? No. I mean, that, or are the aims quite different in what you're doing? I'm just interested in, you're producing very different types of editions, I guess.
That's
is
right,
there
yes.
anything where your work reinforces or complements each other in the construction?
Yes, definitely. We always look at the Tyndale House edition when we discuss about the text or write a commentary on variant passages. So we take this into account. And if there are other possibilities for collaboration, I don't know, but of course we are always open.
And this textual commentary work.
Yeah. So from our perspective, very grateful for the massive data that's being put out by all sorts of groups, and we're able to rely on that. Still waiting for the textual commentary to come out maybe in a couple of years' time, which I think will provide a lot of narrative for some of the thought, which will be, I think, useful for people as they do discussion of individual variants. But as yet, nothing to show. You know. Right. One quick question. One slow question. Yeah.
Well, is there plans when the ECM is finished at that happy day to take the textual commentary that's accompanying each volume and put it in like a combined volume that you have the textual commentary in one place? Because it could potentially, fit if someone isn't able to afford the whole ECM, that they could get the textual commentary that is accompanying it.
It's already there for Mark and Acts.
But like combining it all into one, like the textual commentary for the edition as a whole into one sort of volume.
Oh yes, I mean there is. Well, that's something we have to talk about in the future. There is a new textual commentary on the way. I don't know whether I should mention it here.
Yeah,
which will replace Metzger's textual commentary and certainly the ECM commentary that is being built while we edit will take advantage of this commentary already. And, this will grow because now we are working online, and it is a pity in a way that our textual commentary is so little received and criticized. I mean, people go there and look at what we say, but never comment. I don't know why that is. There seems to be a high threshold.
right. Well, thank you very much.